technically. But let's keep in mind, these people that are wanting to come here, they want to come for a better life too. They have kids too. They have a heart too. So we don't need to be disrespectful. We don't need to talk about them as criminals. They're not. They're families that want a better life, and they're desperate to get here.
So y'all just heard that little small clip right there from Nimrata. And yes, like I told y'all at the end of 2023, I was going into 2024 calling this woman by her real name whenever I had to address her, whether it's in a video about herself or in a video where I'm just happening to mention her name, or even in a live stream. And I think this is probably, the first time that I'm actually doing a full video on this woman. I think I might have mentioned her, of course, in passing, probably talked about her briefly in a live stream. I can't remember if I talked about what recently happened with her with the Civil War stuff, but you know, she messed up on that too, heavily. But we're gonna get into that a little bit later because I found some other stuff pertaining to that too. But right here, this woman literally sat up here and said in front of a crowd that we need to stop being disrespectful to the not so secret invasioners, or the South of the Bordarians, two nicknames that y'all know that I've given them over here, and calling them criminals. And I'm sitting here saying to myself, this woman must have been living under a rock for the last year or so, or at least the last few months, because it hasn't exactly been a whole year. Has she not seen the articles that have come out of New York and Chicago in particular about all the level of criminality that has been committed by a vast majority of them? And well, you know what, I'm not gonna say a vast majority of them, but it is a lot. I mean, from theft, whether they're stealing out of stores, a lot of them are store thefts, jumping on cars, getting into confrontations with the police, getting into confrontations with people at the shelter, all types of stuff, getting arrested, getting these low-level charges, if they're even charged at all, and then get released. They get a court date and then don't show up to the court date. Those are just examples from recent stories that I've done. Y'all have gotten not one but two probably within the same week, and now I'm coming to you with this. Lisa Cabrera, and shout out to her, actually did a video on her channel, or she spoke about this one person out of New York who got over here and was like arrested like 6 times within like 14 days. 6 times in 14 days. Remember, I just recently spoke about one who was only in the establishment for 3 weeks and already was arrested and had a mugshot for committing a criminal act, which I believe was theft. So I'm trying to figure out, are we rewriting the definitions of criminals now, Nikki Haley? Because I already messed up. I call her Nikki. Nimrata. So are we rewriting what it means to be a criminal nowadays? It's amazing how this woman is sitting up here and is extending grace and wants us to extend grace to a group of people who don't deserve it. They really aren't even supposed to be over here. I've said so many times in my videos about that. Whatever level of criminality that they've done overseas, like we're in their homeland, wherever they came from, they're escaping that to come over here and commit it here. And for them, the US is like a gold mine because it's more richer. So this is like them stepping into heaven for them after leaving like the 7th circle of hell. So I just wanted to address that right here. This woman is living in La La Land right now, and the thing is, she's pissing off her constituents because the Republicans or the conservatives or the right, they claim to be so anti-immigration or anti-South of the Bordarian, but let's be real here, they are both in on it. When I say both, I mean both political spectrums. I keep telling you, left wing, right wing, they're both attached to the same buzzard. So a lot of them will agree with it, but they won't say it out loud. She just basically said the quiet part out loud, and they're probably going to be upset with her because she said it. She's basically digging a ditch even further and further for herself when it comes to her own presidency. But how am I surprised? Again, this is the same woman that said this about the Civil War just about a week and a half ago.
Please, what was the cause of the United States Civil War?
Well, don't come with an easy question or anything. I mean, I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms and what people could and couldn't do. What do you think the cause of the Civil War was? I'm sorry?
I'm not running for president. I wanted to see your view on the cause of the Civil War.
I mean, I think it always comes down to the role of government. We need to have capitalism. We need to have economic freedom. We need to make sure that we do all things so that individuals have the liberties so that they can have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to do or be anything they want to be without government getting in the way.
Yes, your ears are not deceiving you. This woman actually did say that out of her mouth when it came to the question someone in the audience, when they asked what was the cause of the Civil War. And you can tell by her demeanor when she was first asked that question, when she paused, she didn't know what to say. So this is what she came up out of her mouth with is exactly what came to her mind. The thing is, I truly believe this woman and many of them who don't want to acknowledge the true reason of how the Civil War started, they know what started it, but they can't bring themselves to actually say it. Just like last year when Bethany Mandel went on the Hill and Breonna Joy Gray stopped her dead in her tracks when she wanted to talk about the word woke, and then Breonna stopped her mid-sentence and said, "Can you define the word woke?" And Bethany Mandel was left stuck on stupid. One of the best moments of the year, in my honest opinion, for 2023. I had so much fun going in and making a fool. Well, I couldn't make a fool out of a woman who was already a fool herself. She did that all good on her own. But Nikki Haley basically did the same thing right here. But if that doesn't make it any worse, I want y'all to check out what recently happened when she was at some kind of a meeting on CNN, and they had asked her about that Civil War debacle again.
And this, of course, is referring back to New Hampshire, where you were asked to explain the cause of the Civil War. You obviously did not mention slavery. And afterwards, you came up, you said that was a mistake. In fact, you said it should have been the first thing that you said. So you did come out and say that. Chris Christie, though, came out and said that you gave that answer not because you're, in his words, dumb or racist, but because you're, quote, unwilling to offend anyone by telling the truth. What do you say to that?
No one's ever said that I am unwilling to offend. I offend plenty of people because I call people out when they do something wrong. What I will tell you is Chris Christie is from New Jersey. I should have said slavery right off the bat. But if you grow up in South Carolina, literally in second and third grade, you learn about slavery. You grow up and you have, I had black friends growing up. It is a very talked about thing. We have a big history in South Carolina when it comes to, slavery, when it comes to all the things that happened with the Civil War, all of that. I was thinking past slavery and talking about the lesson that we would learn going forward.
So everybody just heard that. Everyone just saw that when it was brought up again about the Civil War. She goes into she babbles again, but this time she does the typical, well, I grew up in South Carolina, so I had black friends growing up. I'm surprised she didn't go the distance and says, my daughter is married to a black man, which her daughter actually is. She does have a black son-in-law. I'm surprised she didn't go that route. I mean, that would have been a little bit more personal because you have one that's now technically part of your family via your daughter. Not that that would have made it any better, but it's just basically the same thing where PC, or in her case, the POC, who are very staunchly anti-black, whether they want to admit to it or not, will try to cover themselves in the veil that they aren't by saying, I have a black friend, or I have a black spouse, or I have black associates, or I work around black people, and so on and so forth. I hire black people. So it's just no way that I could be what I truly am, which is anti-black. That's BS. We peeped that game a long time ago. But like I said, that Civil War question right there is literally the thing that's probably going to put an entire hole in her campaign. If it hasn't done so already. It's not enough to say it put a dent. This one put a whole damn hole in it that could probably sink her ship faster than the Titanic. And one thing I forgot to mention in the little part right there when I was inserting the clip about the Civil War, when someone answered the question, they had the nerve to try to come out and say that it was a Democratic plant that was sent there to ask her that one specific question, as if it was a complete and utter setup. But what happened is, by her not answering that question properly, now if that question was to come up again with any of her other running mates or whatever the case may be, now they're basically giving the cheat code to say what the Civil War was actually about, if they even have the guts to say it. We know ramen noodles ain't gonna have much to say about it. You know, ramen noodles is Indian just like she is, and we know he don't like black people. Harvey stays on his head every chance he gets. I swear Harvey will look like he was about to blow a gasket in one of the most recent videos that he just did about Vivek Ramaswamy, or ramen noodles as I like to call him. If y'all watch that video, y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, back to Nimrata. I made sure to get her name right this time, because like I said, I slipped up a couple minutes ago, but you know, it's a new year, so I'm still just starting to get into the groove and calling her by her real name, especially since, you know, she's out of the groove of calling herself by her real name. She did the typical thing that I knew she would do when it was to come into the situation. Now, it's funny because you have PC out here trying to say that there's this anti-white wave going on out here. Imagine if the shoe was on the other foot and they asked black people about the Holocaust and they gave some roundabout answer, sort of like what Nikki Haley did when it came to the topic of the Civil War. A black person would not have been able to use I have Jewish friends, or I have PC friends, or they wouldn't extend them that type of grace. Yet this woman gonna get up here and say, I had black friends growing up when I was growing up in South Carolina. Where are they now, Nimrata? Do you know them by name? Did you grow up with them, or did you just like say that you went to school with them? Because there's a difference, y'all. There's a difference between saying you had black friends growing up and you went to school with black kids. There is a difference. That's another thing we gotta like break down into as well. They love to say that, did you grow up on the block with them? Did you just kind of see them? She saw them in the grocery store. That's probably what it was. She grew up in she saw them in the grocery store. And we need to see what was the demographics of the town she grew up in. That'll tell it all right there. Where are these so-called friends now? Can we call them up and actually confirm that they knew you? And then better yet, maybe we can dig a little bit deeper to find out what you were like as a child. Or did you just grow into this person that you are now? Keep in mind, this is also the same woman that did not want to immediately take down that Confederate flag initially until after what happened with Dylan Roof. But years prior, she kept saying the same thing that PC loved to say about the Confederate flag, that it's a part of Southern heritage. I remember that. However, there is one last thing I want to show y'all about Nimrata, and this is a bit of a throwback. 14 years now to be exact, when she said these statements when she was asked the same question back in 2010 about the Civil War.
What's your belief about the reason the Civil War was fought?
I mean, again, I think that as we look in government, as we watch government, you have different sides. And I think that you see passions on different sides. And I don't think anyone does anything out of hate. I think what they do is they do things out of tradition and out of beliefs of what they believe is right. I think you had one side of the Civil War that was fighting for tradition, and I think you had another side of the Civil War that was fighting for change. You know, at the end of the day, what I think we need to remember is that, you know, everyone is supposed to have their rights. Everyone's supposed to be free. Everyone's supposed to have the same freedoms as anyone else. So, you know, I think it was tradition versus change is the way I see it.
Tradition versus change on what?
On individual rights and liberty of people.
That was Nimrata being asked the same question back in 2010 about the Civil War. Now, the difference between then and now is that then she didn't have any pushback, because for most people, this is their first time seeing this video. Like when I first saw this a couple weeks ago, that was my first time seeing it. Now, mind you, for those of y'all who didn't know, when I was doing undergrad, I was in South Carolina, so she was still governor at the time when I was an undergrad down there. I used to always hear her name, but I never saw her face. I was like, who was this Nikki Haley that everyone keeps talking about? I'm not even gonna lie, I was expecting to see possibly a black woman at the very least. But when I found out that it wasn't, I was like, oh, okay, you know, I didn't think nothing, but I always kept hearing her name, but I never saw her face. It's almost like she was a phantom. And now that I have seen her face, I don't want to see it anymore. So again, she sat right here in 2010 and said the same thing. She didn't mention slavery, but again, she didn't have no pushback at the time because many people didn't even know this video existed. Remember, that was at a time when social media, it was still in its infancy stages. Like at that time, Twitter had just came out. Twitter was like only like a year old. It was still young. You had Facebook. The smartphone was only out for about 2 years, about 3 years at that time. So that was still very young. You had Instagram, but Instagram, like at that time, was still kind of exclusive to a particular device that is no longer around anymore. I'm talking about the BlackBerry, and so on and so forth. It started to expand. Like it wasn't no TikTok, there was no Snapchat or anything like that. A lot of websites didn't have the bandwidth to put videos onto it because the servers weren't as expanded like that back then, like they are now, and a host of other things. And then this video pops up now because of what she said recently. And it's no different. She literally said pretty much the same thing then that she said now, which means what she said then and now is what she meant. She had to have a bug put in her ear to just come out and say, oh, by the way, it was about slavery. Of course it was. Like, duh, everybody knows that. Clearly you didn't. Not a couple weeks ago, before you had to do a PR move and clean it up, and not 14 years ago when you said the exact same thing and didn't have to clean it up. So I'm trying to tell y'all right now, this is who the Nimrata, Randhawa, this is the real her right here, not who she's trying to play herself up to be and to her constituents and to her base to try to get these votes so she can become president. Only in her dreams will that actually happen, because in reality, where we live at, that's not happening, not by a long shot. And she has to know this. Like I said, this is a huge election year right here, and a lot of them ain't gonna make it to the finish line. I'm just saying. And she's one of the people that falls into the a lot category.